Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Shuya is the CEO of a company that specializes in creating video games. He's charismatic, smart, and admired by many women in the country. One day, on his way to the office, he gets hit by a car. He quickly contacts his assistant, Xing Yun, and tells her to come to him immediately since she's nearby. When Yun arrives and sees the driver of the car, she says again, "This keeps happening. Can't they just leave his charisma alone?" Shuya approaches the car and moves the driver away from it. He then tells Yun to handle the situation with his girl, referring to the driver, and walks away. The driver, however, follows him, trying to strike up a conversation and get to know him better, but he ignores her. Yun stops the driver and points out that she's in the wrong and will have to pay a large compensation. The driver is shocked, realizing her plan to get close to Shuya has failed. She runs off, but Yun catches up to Shuya in the elevator and starts talking about him. She recalls how, 2 years ago, Shuya met her by chance, learned her name, and found out it meant luck. He then decided to hire her. And since then, the company has become one of the most successful game development companies in the country. When they both arrive at the office, a designer presents Shuya with a proposal to develop characters for a game they are working on, but Shuya isn't impressed and dismisses the idea. Later, Yun meets with 2 other female employees who discuss how Shuya has been working on developing a game called The Dungeon and has rejected all the development suggestions the designers have submitted. He even said that anyone with a good idea could present it, and if it's good enough, they could be responsible for developing the dungeon, even if they were just a cleaner. The employees encourage Yun to come up with an idea and submit it, and she begins to consider it. Shuya then goes horseback riding, impressing the women who watch him. After finishing his ride, he meets with the president of another company to negotiate a deal. Yun, of course, accompanies him. The president agrees to the deal, but only if Shuya can beat him in a horse race. Shuya confidently accepts, wins the race, and the president concedes the deal. Shuya then takes Yun home, and on the way, she mentions that she knows he has started developing the dungeon and has a great idea for it. As she tries to pull out her idea from her bag, she gets distracted and almost gets hit by a car, but Shuya saves her in a romantic moment. He calls her his lucky charm and says her presence has been good for him. He then snaps her out of her daydream with a light tap on the head and starts walking away. Yun asks him about her idea, and Shuya tells her that if she can find someone to vouch for her, she can present her idea. If it's good, she'll be responsible for developing the game. Back at the office, Shuya learns from an employee that Yun left early because she had a blind date. This annoys Shuya. Meanwhile, Yun goes on her date with a guy named Cho. They talk, and she explains that she's always busy with work, which is why she's never dated anyone before. Cho lightens the mood and finds her personality attractive. Shuya keeps calling her, and after she ignores several calls, he persists until she finally answers. He lies, saying he urgently needs some papers, so Yun has to leave. Cho understands the situation and offers to take her back. In reality, Shuya is at his scheduled meeting, expecting to meet with the company's president to finalize a deal. However, the president's sister shows up instead, trying to flirt with Shuya. He receives a video call from his sister and excuses himself to answer it in private, but the woman insists he takes the call in front of her. He replies, "Whatever you think," and then answers the call. His sister asks where he is, and he says he was supposed to have a business meeting, but it seems to have turned into a blind date, which he's not interested in. The woman gets upset, thinking his sister is actually his girlfriend, and after a brief confrontation, she leaves angrily. Shuya stays calm and asks his sister why she called. She tells him she's returning to China soon, and that he should come pick her up, then ends the call. Shuya then drops Xing Yun off at the company and tells her she's kind and that they should go out for dinner together another day. Yun is overjoyed that he likes her and heads inside, unable to believe it. She starts daydreaming about how Shuya will apologize, call her beautiful, and give her the contract to develop the game The Dungeon. She laughs to herself until the other employees notice her and ask why she's there. She tells them that Shuya said he needed important papers. They inform her that he left early and probably did this as a punishment after finding out she went on a blind date. Yun shrugs it off and calls Shuya in front of them, pretending to be indifferent. She tells him, "Fine, but get ready because the guy I went out with really liked me, and we're going to be together soon," then hangs up. Shuya gets really jealous. As promised, Shuya lets Yun present her idea for developing the dungeon in front of him and all the managers. Everyone is impressed with her idea, and she finishes the presentation and returns to her friends. They caution her that Shuya might reject her idea because of what she did, but Yun confidently says that would be foolish. Just then, Shuya appears behind her, having overheard everything. Her friends signal to her that Shuya is there, and she nervously changes her tone, praising Shuya as the best boss. Shuya then calls her over, and she follows him, scared that she might get fired. Instead, Shuya tells her that they have accepted her idea for developing the dungeon and that she'll be responsible for the game's development, giving her 3 months to complete it. Yun is ecstatic and thanks him, nearly bursting with happiness as she leaves. A few days later, Shuya checks in with Yun to see how the game development is progressing. She presents her latest idea, but he asks her to revise it. She's a bit frustrated and asks him if he's serious, to which he replies that he is. He also tells her she needs to start dating to understand the game's relationship and dating aspects better. Shuya then asks if she's been in contact with the guy she went on a date with. Yun tells him that Cho, unfortunately, hasn't called her back even though he was really nice to her. Shuya asks for her phone and sends a message to Cho, trying to sabotage things by asking why he hasn't called Yun back. Yun gets upset, thinking that now Cho definitely won't respond, but to her surprise, Cho replies, saying he'll pick her up at the office that evening for a date. Yun is delighted, but Shuya is visibly irritated. Later that night, after work, the employees stay behind, eager to see who Yun's date is. Shuya sees them and asks what they're doing, and they tell him they're waiting to see Yun's boyfriend. Shuya looks over and sees Yun leaving and getting into a car with Cho, which shocks him. He tries to catch up to her but doesn't make it in time. Shuya is left standing there, realizing that Cho was his sister's ex-boyfriend. Cho takes Yun to the cinema, but during the movie, Cho falls asleep, which surprises Yun. However, she doesn't mind too much and just snacks on some popcorn while reminiscing. Shuya's sister returns from her trip and finds Shuya waiting for her outside her home. They go inside and Shuya notices that she's sad. He asks her if she still loves Cho and why they broke up in the first place. She explains that his family found out she had a child and she blames Shuya for it. He tells her to call him if she needs anything and then leaves. After the movie, Cho and Yun leave together and he apologizes for falling asleep. She brushes it off, saying it's okay, and accepts his apology. He then asks her how she'd feel about coming over to his place at the weekend to watch another movie together. She casually replies, sure, no problem, and they make plans. The next day, Yun tells her friend about the upcoming movie night at Cho's place. Her friend teases her, saying it sounds like Cho is ready to take things to the next level, and drags Yun to a clothing store to help her prepare. Coincidentally, Shuya sees them there and asks what they're doing. Yun's friend accidentally blurts out that Yun will be going to Cho's house that weekend. Shuya gets upset but stays silent, telling them to wait while he finishes paying. They then spot Shuya's sister with him and assume she's his girlfriend, panicking and running out. When Shuya asks what they were looking for, they reply, Cho's new girlfriend Yun, then asks her friend why they ran, and her friend explains it's because they didn't want Shuya's girlfriend to see her, adding that she has a hunch Shuya has liked Yun for a long time. Yun dismisses the idea, but her friend insists, saying she should think about it and ask herself how she feels when she thinks about him. Yun replies that he's nice, but she doesn't believe he's interested in her. Her friend responds, you'll see. He's probably upset right now, and will do anything to stop you from spending that night with Cho. Yun remains unconvinced. Later that night, Cho takes Yun to his house. When they arrive, his mother opens the door, surprising Yun when she realizes Cho still lives with his parents. They invite her in and treat her kindly, getting to know her and even talking about marriage, which makes her laugh in disbelief. She realizes they already like her. Just then, her phone rings. It's Shuya. He lies, telling her he's with the marketing manager for the dungeon game and needs her to come over immediately. Yun agrees and asks for the location. Shuya then calls his cousin, explaining the situation and asking him to pretend to be the marketing manager. His cousin agrees and suggests they meet at the golf club he's currently at. Shuya agrees and gives Yun the details. Yun apologizes to Cho's family, explaining she has to leave, and as she's about to go, Cho's mom gives her a bracelet as a gift. Yun tries to refuse, knowing it's expensive, but Cho's mom insists. Cho offers to drive Yun, but she declines, saying a taxi will do just fine. As she leaves, Cho watches her go, only to spot Shuya's sister standing at a distance.